Where do you think the global economy is going this year and particularly next year?
The global economy this year is resilient and performing better than we feared when the year started.
What a relief.
We are projecting 3.2% growth this year, 3.2% growth globally next year. And that is quite impressive given the major transformation forces in play, from geopolitics to technology to demography, and given the trade tensions that have impacted the year. But with 3.2% and very high level of debt in many countries, this is better than we feared, but less than we need. And less than historically growth has been prior to COVID. The average growth rate prior to COVID was 3.7%. So 3.2 is disappointing. What are the sources of resilience? First, over the last decades, most countries, especially emerging market economies, have done very well to build good institutions, to have in place strong policy frameworks. And that helps in this time of very high uncertainty. Secondly, most countries, including China, have gotten the government out of economic activity and let the private sector in. Private sector is more adaptable, especially again in this time of rapid change. Three, the trade problems we started the year with in April have proven to be not so dramatic. In fact, two things have happened. The rates that the U.S. announced in April, 23% on average, through negotiations have gone down to 17%, and through exceptions have gone down further to under 10%. And two, majority of countries have decided not to retaliate, not to impose tariffs on their trading partners. So these three things combined with the force of artificial intelligence creating high expectations for developments, they have kept the world economy in a reasonably good shape. But on the other hand, we need higher growth to meet the expectations of people. And we tell everybody, do more of what has worked, more space for private sector, good policies in place, and pursue structural reforms that would make you more productive.
Let me ask you about top-level diplomacy between China and the United States. We see in Busan, the talk apparently was quite successful, and we see both sides coming in public suggesting the other side is implementing what they promised. So that's a good sign, but how much do you expect this kind of impact can be sustainable? Well, at the same time, what does that mean as the MD of IMF for the stability of the global economy?
We have been consistent in our message. When there are trade tensions, address them through negotiation. Resolve them in a timely fashion. It is good for the world economy, but it's also good for the individual national economies to have more predictability of where they're headed. And in that sense, we very much welcome that maturity that led to the two largest economies agreeing on a way forward. We also see very interesting development. Medium-sized economies, small economies, they are very active in pursuing a more open and integrated global economy because they cannot on their own cope. We also see more bilateral deals. We see more regional agreements. We see more appetite to reform the World Trade Organization so global trade can continue on a rules-based basis. We support this direction.
Now, with still uncertainties, we see countries and economies trying to figure out what's next. For example, what's going to be the logic? Whether it's about supply chains or interactions with one another. You also see apparently some contradictions all going on at the same time. Cooperation, competition, security, growth, and short-term, long-term, all these different areas. So what does that mean, once again, Madam MD, with your team doing research all over the world for the global economy?
Let's recognize that the world is now multipolar, quite diverse, but it is also quite integrated. We are intertwined. It is not possible to pull one country out and say, that's it, we close our borders, we don't want to interact with anyone. Not to mention that digital interaction, very difficult to be completely stopped. So what does that mean? It means that we have to be prepared for more complicated relations among nations. We also have to recognize that national security concerns in this multipolar world are more significant than they used to be. Therefore, decisions are going to be made on economic grounds, but also factoring in national security. The more we can create, and this is the job of the IMF, a level playing field, so all countries feel that there is fair treatment, that their voice is being heard, that they can see the facts for decision making equally, the better. And this is where the IMF comes in. We take the pulse of each economy every year, and then we look at the world and create a common platform for countries to see what are the trends, where the world is headed, so they can make their own economic policy with eyes open and this information in place.
But at the same time, there's concern whether there has been over-politicizing of the issues such as national security for economic development and growth.
I would agree with you that once these national security concerns came into place, calibrating them is not an easy task. I think we will see some deviations, different countries doing different things. But what I can tell you from our experience in our annual meetings in Washington, countries recognize that cooperation is a necessity. And actually, today, they don't take it for granted anymore. They actively engage because, one, there are problems we face that no country can solve on its own. Two, economic cooperation brings benefits. The world is richer because we cooperate. And that enlightened self-interest leads to cooperation among nations.
We have seen rhetorics against multilateralism, against the global governance. For example, the UN is now being arguably whether functioning well or not. There's also talks about other organizations such as WTO. So what does that mean for IMF? How do you think you can survive and thrive with these strong rhetorics and also increasing concerns about how global governance should be done?
First and foremost, stick to our mandate. What is our mandate? Macroeconomic and financial stability, growth, and employment. We, in a world of more uncertainty, more shocks, we are a source of stability. Our job is to build resilience to the forces that affect economies. Countries see value in the IMF because of that clear mandate and service we provide. Second, we are very disciplined. Today, the resources we spend as institution are the same they were 20 years ago. Our membership increased. We now have 191 members. The complexity in the world have increased, but we are very focused to deliver to our members value for their participation. Three, we are the only institution on this planet that can swiftly rescue countries in trouble. Today we have 50 programs. There are 50 countries that need the IMF. Just to give you some examples from Asia, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, they rely on the fund to provide swiftly sizable support. And we do it with no cost to taxpayers. And that value of the fund demonstrably has been respected by all our members, rich, poor, big, small. And I think that as long as we continue to be focused on delivering macroeconomic and financial stability, growth and employment, the IMF will be cherished and respected by our members.
However, there is still a lot of concerns about whether developing countries and emerging economies are having the right proportion of decision-making within IMF, as important a body as you just illustrated.
It is very important for the IMF and all other institutions, international organizations, to recognize that the world is changing, we also have to change. In the case of IMF, over the years, we have increased voice and participation of emerging markets and developing economies, and we will continue to work in that direction. Very important for the IMF is that we have created an additional representation for sub-Saharan Africa. So the region that needs our support the most has 3 representatives to speak on their behalf. We also are increasing the participation of nationals of different countries on our staff. I am the first managing director that comes from an emerging market economy. I take this as a very important responsibility to the emerging market world. I have 4 deputies. One of them is Mr. Bo Li from China. And then on our senior management team, on our staff, we look like the world. I want to repeat this. Change in the world means we have to evolve, we have to move forward.
Because recent numbers have really shown developing countries, emerging economies, so-called global south, has become a majority of the global growth of trade. Just as one of those many examples as in front of us. There has been increasing concern once again, because economies are not necessarily doing well all over the world, about the credibility of US dollar and also about the current currency regime in the world. I really wonder, when these news coming out, as the MD of IMF, what are you working on together with your colleagues to make sure things are getting to the right direction for most of the world's economies?
When we look at the role of the dollar in the world economy, we recognize that it is based on the strength of the United States and, most importantly, of the depth and liquidity of the capital markets in the U.S. In other words, the dollar is useful to others because there are strong institutions and strong fundamentals behind it. When we think of the currency composition, over the years we have seen that the global reserves moved on the basis of evolution of currencies. For example, the euro didn't exist. Now it is about 20% of global reserves. The RMB is also a part of the basket of currencies on the basis of which the special drawing rights, the reserve asset of the IMF, is based. what is important is that we very carefully monitor policy developments that have systemic significance. And as you refer to the Fed, of course, we monitor decisions of the Fed. Right now, what we see is the Fed is easing interest rates, and the dollar has weakened a little bit. This is good for emerging market economies. It makes their currencies more competitive, stronger, and it is also a source of more access to financial resources for emerging markets. We advise our members on the basis of monitoring these developments, and this is again how the fund is very useful. Instead of each country trying to understand what is going on its own, they rely on our expertise and policy advice.
If you look at the world stage, there are increasing numbers of financial institutions playing their different roles. Regionally, for example, you see AIIB, you also see New Development Bank. There has been talks about the Global South Development Bank, and the list goes on. So how do you see the cooperation and apparently even competition between IMF and these institutions and to-be institutions?
The IMF has a special role among these institutions. We are the only ones that survey the economic, financial health of every nation. And as such, we are a source of information for the development banks. And two, when there is a need to rescue a nation in trouble, usually we bring together everybody. Cooperation among multilateral institutions is always important. In a world that is more fragmented, even more important. And I can say wholeheartedly that you would always see the IMF being a strong partner to institutions that work for development.
Latest IMF estimate, the economic growth rate for China this year, next year have all been raised. Tell us why.
We have been observing the developments in China over this year, and our conclusion is, one, China is resilient, and policymakers here have acted responsibly to support the economy. Fiscal support, monetary policy support have helped the Chinese economy in a turbulent year to perform well. Second, China's exports are quite competitive, and actually exports have increased this year, and that gives impetus to growth. At the same time, we strongly recommend to China to shift its growth model from one that is based on exports to domestic consumption. Why? The Chinese economy is just too big to continue to rely on exports for growth. And the Chinese society, 1.4 billion people, this is a consumer base that can be very effective in boosting growth potential for China.
We see some of the earlier policies already being done and implemented about boosting consumption, for example, trying to support people's welfare. But it seems that it has not necessarily transformed the picture yet. So many are asking whether it is still a matter of time, or matter of degree, or a matter of different directions.
It is a matter of degree. We recommend a forceful, comprehensive set of measures that address the property sector resolutely, that build confidence in consumers to spend money through social support measures, and that create a reform environment that makes consumption more attractive in how performance of policymakers is assessed. We see in China tremendous opportunity for this shift in the development model today. because China has very talented people. China has an innovation-based economy, and China has a lot that people can enjoy and benefit from, especially in services. We also see that the leadership in China recognizes that the rest of the world would like to see China being more balanced. And the rest of the world is getting a bit scared that maybe if China continues with export-driven growth, they may find it more difficult to develop their own economies. I want to pay my respect to Chinese leadership for the determination for China to be an open economy and responsible economy. And that I know is one of the reasons why in the 15th five-year plan there is this focus on consumption. This being said, China is big. Changing direction takes time. And also in the Chinese society, saving is something that people value. I respect that. It is personal security, but if there is security that is provided to people and confidence in their future, then they can enjoy more things in life. And I also trust that the younger generation of Chinese, they may be more amenable to this new growth model.
The 15th five-year plan you mentioned earlier already in several of your answers. I want to go a little bit more specific on that. You see the outline, it suggests shifts of consumption habits and models, supply chain possibilities, innovation, ecosystems, and the list goes on. How would you assess the nature of China's 15th five-year plan? Black and white already put out there in front of the world. And also, what could that mean for such an important economy?
What we see today is positive because the emphasis is put on three things. One, high-quality growth. And this is where the emphasis on innovation is really valuable. Two, a very clear objective for China to reach by 2035 the kind of moderate development nation status on the basis of GDP per capita. And that is really good because it means it is people's focused, it is people-centered. And three, emphasis on consumption. Because if China just simply cannot continue to grow on the basis of exports, the rest of the world may then be tempted to become protectionist against China. And China, the country that strongly stands by open and inclusive global economy, of course wouldn't want to see that. Plus the potential for improving the quality of life of people in China by shifting towards more services, from goods to services, more domestic consumption than export. This is going to be beneficial for the well-being of the Chinese people, and I wish all the very best to everybody in China.
We see industrial policies being widely spread all over the world these days, particularly over the past 2 to 3 years. While economies struggle to find their competitive edge, what has been the impact of industrial policy, looking at the performances of economies, and how do you see the spread of this policy and its future potential?
We are concerned about it. We actually analyzed this increase in industrial policy, and what we find is that the record is mixed. Yes, there are market failures. They determine the use of industrial policy to correct these market failures. For example, here in China, the reorientation towards environmental sustainability did benefit from industrial policy oriented towards green technologies, electric vehicles, solar panels. But once this is corrected, then the support should be withdrawn and let the market decide how to allocate resources. Our advice to China is set a high standard. We are not saying do not use industrial policy, but use it prudently. For the rest of the world, it is the same picture. Countries are moving in industrial policy sometimes without that high standard being met. And our advice is be careful. Misallocation of resources means that instead of enriching your society, you're actually causing a loss of productivity.